I was like the youngest guy in the lodge by 20 years. And this guy comes forward and he says, we're going to lead you through this oath. But it's this long, involved, and ultimately blood-curdling oath. What none of these men understand is that deep down inside, there's this very dark, evil energy. I would go up to these guys that have been in the Scottish Rite forever. And I'd say, okay, I'm now a sublime prince of the royal secret. So what's the royal secret? And again, this is something that probably only 1 in 1,000 Masons in America understands. Is that the royal secret?
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's guest is someone who has explored the darkest levels of spirituality, one of them being Freemasonry. He became a 33rd degree Mason, was part of high-level secret societies, and he is not afraid to share what he's not supposed to talk about. So I took this opportunity to ask him as much as I could in the limited time that we had. No matter how much you know or don't know about Freemasonry, I can almost guarantee you that you'll learn a lot from this interview, as everything that is shared here is in some way related to it. Get ready to have your mind blown by Mr. Bill Sneblin as he shares a dark journey that he and his wife took and the unsettling things that they uncovered along the way.
When I got to college, and again, I wanted to be a priest. This was a minor seminary college, Loras College. At the time, it was a minor seminary. It isn't anymore. I had a priest in my theology class who had a doctorate in theology, and he was teaching a course in Christology. Because again, I was wanting to be a priest. And he took me aside, and he said, if you want to be a priest, in the Catholic Church, it's taught, sacerdotes est altus Christus, the priest is another Christ. So if you want to be like Christ, he says to me, do you want to be like Christ? And I says, well, of course. Doesn't every Christian want to be like Christ? He said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what Christ did. And again, that made sense. And again, nowadays we've kind of become suspicious about priests. Mm-hmm. But this was like 1968. And a priest was like God. I mean, whatever the priest said, that was it, And he said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what he did. And he went to the East and studied with the gurus in India. He went and studied with the lamas in Tibet. He went to Egypt and studied with the magicians there. That's how he was able to raise the dead, to walk on water, to do all these miracles. So he says, what you need to do is you need to start studying the occult. This is a priest telling me this. And so I thought, okay, now mind you, this is obviously decades before there was an internet. I mean, there was a little bookstore downtown. And I went there and I found a few scattering books on like the occult. And I found this book that was called Diary of a Witch by Sybil Leek. And she was one of the very first witches to, so to speak, come out of the broom closet. She was a British woman, and she was a medium. And anyhow, I read the book, and she was asserting in the book that witches were not evil, that this was an ancient pagan mystery religion. Among other things, she claimed that Jesus was a witch, and his 12 apostles were his coven, along with their wives, So I kind of bought into that.
This is how the devil was tricking on, making it sound sweet on the outside. Man, I know that's how he be working.
And I found out about this guy, Alex Sanders, who was the supposed king of the witches over in London. I sent him a letter. This is around 1968, 69. And his wife sent me back a thing. Okay, here's a coven in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 90 minutes from Dubuque. I went there and I got initiated as a witch. And then later on, I hooked up with an Alexandrian coven in Boston, and I was made a witch high priest. Started covens in, first of all, in Dubuque, where I was, and then moved to Milwaukee because there was a fellow there who had an occult bookstore, because Milwaukee's a huge city. And he said, I've got all of these people that want to become witches. Can you come and teach them?
When we're talking about like you being in a covenant, you doing witchcraft, I just want to make sure that we don't skip over that part. Like, what kind of witchcraft are we talking about? Because there's a lot of.
It was okay. Witchcraft originally, the kind of publicly available witchcraft was originally started by Gerald Gardner, and he came out. Witchcraft became legal in England. It was a crime until 1951. It was made legal, and he claimed, and all of this is disputed, but he claimed that he came in contact with an ancient coven of witches in the New Forest region of England. They initiated him and then made him a high priest, and he went off and initiated other people. Then there's this other bunch, this Alexander's fellow. He also claims to have been initiated by an ancient line of witches by his grandmother. So those were the two main fountainheads of witchcraft in the 60s. Both were from England, but both had, spread to America. And it was white witchcraft, both groups.
So it wasn't black magic.
Their rituals were virtually identical. And but the Alexandrian group that I was in was more into ceremonial magic, which is like kind of, if you know, in like Protestantism, they have the distinction between high church and low church. Well, Alexandrian is more high church witchcraft. But we didn't believe in the devil. We didn't think we were worshiping the devil. We thought we were worshiping a goddess, a moon goddess, and a horn god. So it was like ditheism, if you will, two deities. And we didn't believe in demons. We just believed that it was all this nature, airy fairy, gathering herbs in the forest and dancing in the nude. And, it all sounds very innocent. Except there's, especially in the Alexandrian rite, there's also some sex magic that's involved. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure that we got that covered. So actually, let's go back to the occult bookstore that you were talking about, and let's pick up the story from there.
Well, so anyway, so we hooked up with this fellow in the basement of the store. We would hold these classes. They were packed because there were all these people. And again, this was 1972. And, there was all these people who were kind of like quasi hippies, and they wanted to get into the occult and magic and blah, blah, blah. The other thing that happened at the same time is that we encountered this fellow called Eli, who was a Grandmaster Druid of North America. And Druids are a little bit different than witches. It's kind of like the difference between being a Baptist and being a Methodist, And we were invited down to Arkansas, which is where this fellow lived. He had lived on top of a mountain. He had kind of a organic farm there. And we went through the whole summer, got all this occult training, high priests in Druidism by the time we got done. At one point, now understand, this fellow that owned the occult bookstore, he was kind of a manipulative guy who was very, he was older than me, very cunning. He told me, he took me aside and he said, if you really want to understand magic, you need to read this book. And he handed me the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. And I said, well, why would I want to read the Satanic Bible? Witches don't believe in Satan. And he said, well, just read the book. And LaVey's contention was that magic is really about Satan. But Satan is like an archetype, he said. There is no real Satan, but it's like an energy, egregore, an archetype that you can draw upon. And it kind of made sense to me. And again, the devil was gradually pulling me in. Like the whole thing.
Planting them seeds. We're going to let it go off that one. Post another one tomorrow. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments.